President Reevely, members of the board, faculty, staff, parents, friends, but most importantly, class of 2014, you made it. Congratulations. And has been mentioned a couple times, and you're probably going to hear it a couple times more before you walk across the stage, this is also the 175th year of Longwood's history. Makes you the third oldest university, higher education institution in Virginia, next to those wannabes in Williamsburg and Charlottesville. Now, as President Reevely mentioned, I do recall coming back to the university back in 2002 after the Great Fire. One of the great opportunities you get to come as governor is you get to come every year to Longwood, regardless of whether you get on campus or not, because you get to come to Girl State, which is kind of an interesting experience. But I remember coming back in 2002, a year after the Great Fire. And as President Reevely mentioned, there was an enormous spirit here on campus that fire was not going to set back this great institution. And as was mentioned as well, that was also a moment in time when Longwood College got changed into Longwood University. And as the president has mentioned, with statistic after statistic, this is an institution whose recognition, quality, and merit continues to rise, and you are all a living embodiment of that. So it is great to be back. All right, that's an applause line. Yeah, that's an applause line for these guys. And this reputation is spreading not just in Farmville or Southside, not just across Virginia, but across the country and the world. So it is a real honor for me to be back on this very special occasion for all of you, and again, a memorable moment in Longwood's history. I will also recall, having done these a few times, that no one ever remembers the graduation speaker unless they speak too long. So I've got three relatively brief pieces of advice. First, I think about where you are sitting right now, and when I was sitting there, now close to 35 years ago, I was the first person in my family to graduate. And I knew at that moment, way back in actually 1977, that I was going to have opportunities and be able to go places that my parents only dreamed about. Today, you have that same kind of promise and opportunity in front of you. And you go on to this next stage of life well prepared with a Longwood University education. So my first piece of advice is simply this. You have an obligation to strive, to reach, and candidly, to not be afraid to fail. Now, I know with parents here, to talk about your kids' failure after college is not necessarily something you want to hear. But I believe that is something that is unique about America. I have failed at everything I've ever tried to do. If you read through the whole background introduction before I was governor or senator, I had a pretty good run in business. What the bio doesn't tell is how I actually got started. A couple years out of law school, I took my life savings, $5,000, invested them in a little startup energy company, went to work for that company, and in 6 weeks, I helped that company go totally bankrupt. After that, I went into real estate. Failed at that in 6 months. So at the ripe old age of 26, college and law school, 2 business failures under my belt, I was flat broke, living out of my car, but you know what? I got a third shot. There was this brand new industry called cell phones. Now, you all have grown up with cell phones. But I remember I graduated from Harvard for law school, and so my law school classmates were at all these fancy firms, and I went to all of them in 1982 and said, there's this new thing, cell phones, you gotta get involved. To a person, they said to me, Warner, you are so crazy. Who's gonna want a car phone? Get a real job. They're still practicing law. I was lucky enough to go on and found the company Nextel and then become a venture capitalist. And what is unique about that is, in America, what makes us different is everybody ought to get a fair shot. Now, we can't guarantee you success, but we ought to be able to guarantee everyone that fair shot. But let me also acknowledge that story I just told you. As the first person in my family to graduate from college, I came out when I was flat broke with only $15,000 in debt. And today is not a day for discussing policy, but I want you to know that I and others are working on some bipartisan proposals to make it easier to refinance and repay student loans, and make sure you're a little more knowledgeable before you go. Because I don't think anyone should go broke because they want to go to college. So taking a chance, maybe occasionally failing, but being willing to pick yourself up and get back in the game is the first piece of advice. Second piece is, along with this education comes a responsibility to your community and to your country. You're graduating at a time when our country's political and policy debates are pretty intense. Now, I urge you to participate in our nation's debates in a respectful manner, because today we are living in a nation that engages in way too much confrontation and not near enough conversation. Too often, where I work up in the Congress, if you turn on the TV, you only hear the loudest voices on either end of the political spectrum, who spend all their time simply criticizing the other side, and it happens in both parties, rather than trying to offer solutions. So as educated students, how do you sort that out? Educated citizens. The trouble is, as graduates with those smartphones that the President and Justin took a picture with, you can access more information in those smartphones than your grandparents could access in their whole life. Yet in this age of iPad and iPhone, it seems more and more of us, and it's harder and harder to look beyond simply the eye. While we've become better connected, we seem in many ways to even be more divided. Now, don't misunderstand me. Disagreement and a rigorous debate about the big issues of the day and the challenges we face is both healthy and proper. But we should be able to debate these critical issues without questioning each other's motives or our shared commitment to America. You know, I've been in politics almost 20 years. Let me tell you this. No one in politics, and I mean no one, has a monopoly on virtue, patriotism, or the truth. And for our country to remain a great nation, you all have to get involved. The President mentioned my obsession. We're sitting on $17 trillion of debt. It goes up $4 billion a night. If your elected officials don't come together and fix that, you get stuck with a bill. And that will mean Democrats have to give in on entitlement reform, Republicans have to give on tax reform. And as you participate, I urge you, please, vote for rational leaders. I don't care which party, but people who recognize it's more important to be an American than to be a Republican or a Democrat. Final piece of advice. Class of 2004, listen up. Call your mother. And I don't just say that because tomorrow's Mother's Day. But call your mother, call your father, call your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your brothers and sisters, because after you get done with this ceremony, seek out that special person, because you didn't get here alone, and go up and tell them you love them. It'll make you feel better. It'll make them feel better. So graduates, that's pretty much it. After 4 years or 5 years or 6 years on your journey, as you prepare to leave this great institution, remember, take those risks. Don't be afraid to fail. Stay involved with your country and your community. It's every bit yours as it is mine, and participate. And finally, always, always, always call your mother. Congratulations, class of 2014.